The night before his coronation, Alpha King Kale Ashwood stood on the highest balcony of the Ashwood Palace and looked out over the 9 packs he was about to rule. Torches burned along the stone walls below. Wolves gathered in the courtyard, waiting for the ceremony that would make him their king in full. He should have felt proud. Instead, something inside his chest felt wrong, like a key trying to fit into the wrong lock. Tomorrow he would name his Luna. The choice had already been made for him, in a way. Seraphine Vale, daughter of the Vale Pack, stood as the obvious pick. Her family controlled the Western Territories, and their alliance with the Ashwoods had kept the packs from war for 2 generations. She was beautiful, clever, and calm in front of crowds. Every advisor in the palace told him she was perfect. His wolf did not agree. It never had. Kale pressed his hand against the stone railing and tried to ignore the low, restless growl that lived under his skin whenever Seraphine was near. He told himself it meant nothing. A king could not always follow his instincts. Sometimes duty came first. Down in the courtyard, far from the torches and the noise, a girl named Wren swept dust from the stone path outside the kennels. She worked in silence, as she always did. 3 years had passed since she arrived at the palace gates, half-starved and covered in blood that was not her own, and in all that time, she had never spoken a single word. The staff had stopped asking why. They simply called her the Silent Omega and gave her the lowest jobs no one else wanted. Wren did not mind the work. The kennels were quiet, and the wolves there liked her. She fed them, cleaned their pens, and sat with the sick ones through the night when no one else would. It was the only place in the palace where she felt like herself. That night, one of the young pups had grown ill. Its breathing was shallow, and its small body trembled with fever. Wren knelt beside it in the straw and pressed her palm gently against its side. She hummed something low and wordless, a sound she did not remember learning, and slowly the pup's breathing steadied. She stayed until it fell into a peaceful sleep. She did not notice the tall figure standing in the kennel doorway until she looked up. Kale had come to check on the pup himself, unable to sleep, restless with thoughts of tomorrow. He found the Omega girl instead, kneeling in the straw with the pup curled against her side. He had seen her before, in passing, sweeping floors or carrying water. He had never really looked at her. Now he could not look away. Something in his chest turned over, sharp and sudden, like a door swinging open after being locked for years. His wolf, silent and cold since the day Seraphine's name was chosen, rose up inside him with a force that startled him. It did not growl. It did not resist. It simply recognized her, the way a person recognizes their own reflection. Kale stepped back so quickly he nearly stumbled. Wren watched him with wide, careful eyes, saying nothing, as always. He muttered something about checking on the pup, and left, before his wolf could do something foolish, like cross the room and kneel beside her. He told himself it was exhaustion, nerves before the coronation. Nothing more. He was wrong, and some part of him already knew it. The next morning, the palace buzzed with preparation. Servants strung silver ribbon along the great hall. Cooks filled the kitchens with the smell of roasted meat and fresh bread. Seraphine walked through the halls in a gown the color of moonlight, accepting compliments with practiced grace, though her eyes stayed sharp and watchful, counting who bowed the lowest and who did not bow at all. Wren was assigned to help carry supplies for the feast, moving trays and folding cloth in the kitchens. No one thought to give the silent girl a role in the ceremony itself. She did not expect one. In a quiet corridor near the kitchens, Wren nearly collided with Tomas, the palace beta, and one of Kale's oldest advisors. Tomas had always treated her with a strange kind of gentleness, more than her position deserved. He caught her arm to steady her, then went very still, staring at her wrist where her sleeve had slipped. There, faint against her skin, was a mark shaped like a crescent moon wrapped in thorns. Tomas's face went pale. He pulled her sleeve back down quickly and glanced around to be sure no one had seen. "Where did you get that mark?" he asked, his voice low. Wren only shook her head. She did not know. It had appeared slowly over the past year, deepening with each full moon, and she had learned to keep it hidden beneath long sleeves. Tomas studied her for a long moment, and something shifted behind his eyes, like a memory long buried finally coming loose. "Come with me," he said quietly. There is something you need to see. He led her to a small locked room, deep beneath the palace library, a place few knew existed. Inside, old books and faded portraits lined the walls, untouched by dust despite the years. Tomas pulled one portrait forward, revealing a painting of a woman with silver hair and calm, steady eyes. Around her wrist was the same crescent and thorn mark. "This is Queen Leora Veilthorn," Tomas said, "the last true wolf queen, before the Ashwood line took the throne by force. Her bloodline was hunted nearly to extinction. I believed it had ended with her." He looked at Ren carefully. "I was wrong." Ren's hands trembled as she reached out to touch the frame. Memories she had locked away for 3 years began pushing to the surface. Fire in the night, voices shouting her mother's name, the smell of smoke and blood, and a promise her mother had made her swear before pushing her out into the dark. "Do not speak. Do not be found. Wait until you are recognized by your true mate, and only then will your voice return." She had been silent ever since, not because she could not speak, but because some old, powerful magic had sealed her voice the moment her mother died, binding it until the bond of true mates broke the spell. Tomas knelt before her, his voice gentle. "You are the last heir of the Veilthorn queens, Ren, and I believe the bond that will free your voice has already begun." Ren thought of the kennel, and the tall king standing in the doorway, and the strange, aching pull she had felt when his eyes met hers. That evening, the coronation began. The great hall glowed with candlelight. Every pack leader from the 9 packs had gathered, along with hundreds of wolves eager to witness their new king claim his throne and his Luna. Kale stood at the front in ceremonial black, his crown resting heavy on his head, his face carefully composed. Beside him, Seraphine waited in her moonlight gown, smiling out at the crowd like she had already won. The ceremony moved forward exactly as planned. The elders spoke the old words. The crowd murmured their approval. When the moment came for Kale to formally claim his Luna, he stepped forward, his hand rising toward Seraphine's. And then his wolf tore control from him completely. It was not a decision. It was instinct older than any crown, older than any alliance. Kale's feet turned before his mind caught up, carrying him away from Seraphine, and through the stunned crowd, toward the back of the hall where the servants stood along the wall, nearly invisible in their plain gray clothes. Toward Ren. Gasps rippled through the hall. Seraphine's smile froze, then cracked. Kale did not stop until he stood directly before the silent Omega girl, his breath uneven, his wolf finally, fully at peace for the first time in his life. "It's you," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "It has always been you." The moment their eyes locked, something ancient stirred in the air around them. A warmth spread from Ren's wrist, and the crescent and thorn mark glowed faintly through her sleeve, visible even through the fabric. The crowd fell into stunned silence, sensing that something far bigger than a coronation was unfolding before them. Seraphine's calm shattered. She crossed the hall in a fury, her voice sharp and cold. "This is a servant," she snapped. "A nothing. You would humiliate me, humiliate this entire court, for a mute Omega who scrubs floors?" Her hand rose as if to strike Ren, and in that instant, years of careful masks fell away. The court saw, clearly and without doubt, the cruelty Seraphine had always hidden beneath her practiced smiles. Kale moved to step between them, but he did not need to. The moment Seraphine's rage broke the fragile calm around Ren, something inside the old magic cracked as well. The silence Ren had carried for 3 years shattered like glass. Enough. The word rang through the hall, calm and clear, carrying a weight that made every wolf present, from pack leaders to guards, drop instinctively to one knee. It was not loud, yet it silenced the entire room more completely than any shout could have. Seraphine froze, her hand still raised, her face draining of color as she felt the pull of that voice in her very bones. Ren stood taller than anyone had ever seen her stand, the crescent and thorn mark glowing openly on her wrist now, undeniable in the candlelight. Tomas stepped forward from the crowd, his voice steady despite the shock in his eyes. "She carries the blood of Queen Leora Veilthorn," he announced to the hall. "The true line our kingdom was built upon, and nearly destroyed. Tonight, that line has returned." Whispers spread through the hall like wildfire, pack leaders murmuring old stories they had thought were only legend. Seraphine took a step back, her fury turning to fear as the weight of the room shifted entirely away from her. Chaol turned to face the crowd, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "I chose Aluna based on alliance and duty," he said. "But a king's wolf does not lie, and mine has never accepted anyone but her." He turned back to Ren, and for the first time, he knelt before her, not as a king to a servant, but as a mate, acknowledging the one fate had chosen for him. "I did not know who you were when my wolf chose you. It would not have mattered. It still does not matter. I would have knelt for you either way." Seraphine's alliance, built on ambition rather than loyalty, crumbled within the hour. Her own father, seeing the direction the room had turned, refused to defend her further, unwilling to stand against a bloodline older and more respected than his own. She was quietly escorted from the palace before the night ended, her plans for the throne undone by her own cruelty in front of the one crowd she could not afford to lose. The following days brought change the palace had not seen in generations. Ren, no longer bound by silence, spoke carefully at first, her voice soft but growing steadier with each day. She told Chaol and Tomas what she remembered of the night her pack was destroyed, the mother who had hidden her true identity to protect her, and the years of loneliness that followed. Chaol listened to every word without interruption, holding her hand through the parts that made her voice shake. He did not rush her. He let her set the pace, understanding instinctively that trust mattered more to her than tradition ever could. Slowly, the palace staff who had once overlooked her began to see her differently, not out of fear, but out of genuine respect for the quiet strength she had carried through years no one had noticed. Weeks later, when the bonding ceremony finally took place, it looked nothing like the coronation before it. There was no political posturing, no careful alliances calculated for gain. Pack leaders came because they wanted to witness the return of a bloodline nearly lost to history, and because they had seen with their own eyes the kind of king Chaol chose to become when given the choice between duty and truth. Ren stood beside him in the same courtyard where she had once swept dust and tended sick pups in silence. The kennels she had cared for now stood freshly repaired in her honor, a quiet nod to the years she had spent unseen. She wore no elaborate gown, only simple silver cloth that suited her far better than anything ornate ever could. When Chaol took her hand before the gathered packs, his wolf finally settled into the peace it had been missing since the day he was named heir. Ren's voice, once silenced by grief and old magic, rose clear and steady as she spoke the vows beside him, no longer hidden, no longer afraid. The 9 packs did not bow because law demanded it. They bowed because something in their instincts recognized what had been missing from the throne for generations, a queen who understood both power and kindness, strength and quiet patience. Chaol looked at Ren as the crowd rose around them, and for the first time since his coronation, the ache that had lived in his chest was gone completely. His wolf had known the truth long before he did. Now, standing beside her as she truly was, he understood it too. The silent Omega, who had spent 3 years unseen and unheard, had at last become the wolf queen she was always meant to be.